I like it because I know one thing for certain is that if you do get married, you must commit yourself to that.
Cliff Richard loved one woman for 50 years. She married his best friend instead, then married someone else, then died in his arms. He never married anyone, never had children, just kept singing while hiding the biggest heartbreak in British music history. When police raided his home in 2014, they weren't the first to destroy him. The BBC had already made a secret deal. The allegations were lies, but the damage was real. He lost weight. He got shingles. He couldn't sleep. He said his own home felt contaminated. The man who once filled Wembley Stadium was now afraid to leave his house. On October 14, 1940, in King George's Hospital, Lucknow, British India, Harry Roger Webb came into a world already shaking under the weight of war and revolution. World War II was raging. Indian independence protests were boiling over. In 1946, riots exploded during Direct Action Day, and British families began fleeing the colony. Among them were the Webbs. Harry's father worked in the colonial system, but by 1948, it was clear the empire was collapsing. So they left, not in a car or a plane, but on a slow, packed ship crossing the Indian Ocean. The SS Ranchi was their lifeboat. For 3 long weeks, it carried hundreds of British families, all leaving the only home they'd known. They went from servants in sunshine to rationing in gray skies. England was cold and still recovering from the war. The Webbs ended up in a small house in Chawton, Surrey. Gone were the big rooms and warm evenings. It was a rough start for a boy who had once lived with comfort, but it toughened him. That journey planted something inside him, a need to prove himself, to make something bigger out of this strange new life. And soon Harry Webb disappeared. A man named Harry Grader X was watching closely. He managed talent and had an eye for trends. He told Harry, "You need a name that sounds like rock." "Cliff," he suggested. Strong, British solid like a cliff face. Then came Richard, a tribute to Little Richard, the wild American rock star. Harry Webb was gone. Cliff Richard was born. He didn't just change his name. He changed British music. On August 29, 1958, a song called Move It came out. It sounded raw, loud, and rebellious. Nothing like the clean, polite pop of the time. Cliff was only 18. The song hit number 2 on the UK charts and set off a shockwave. For the first time, British teenagers had their own rock star. He wasn't copying America. He was creating something new. That one song opened the door for everyone who followed, the Beatles, the Stones, and beyond. But it wasn't just the music. It was the mania. When Cliff went on tour that same year, Britain went mad. Girls screamed, cried, and fainted. Boys hated him for stealing the spotlight. Security guards couldn't hold the crowds back. It was Elvis-level chaos. But this was in London, Manchester, and Leeds. It had never happened here before. They called it Cliff hysteria. The newspapers loved it. So did the record labels. In 1959, the madness doubled. Cliff released Living Doll. He didn't even want to. He thought the song was too soft, too fake. "I hated it," he told his producer. But the band changed it to a slow country-style ballad. It hit number 1 and stayed there for 6 weeks, selling 770,000 copies. He got a silver disc in November. By January, he had a gold. Then came Travel in Light, another number 1, 5 more weeks on top. Between the two, Cliff sold over 1 million records. No one else in Britain had done that before. Hollywood came calling. In 1959, Cliff appeared in a dark, dramatic film called Serious Charge. It wasn't lighthearted. It dealt with homosexuality, false accusations, and heavy moral questions. Cliff was only 19, and it shocked everyone that he signed on. A year later, he starred in Espresso Bongo, a satirical film that poked fun at the music industry. With these roles, Cliff made it clear he wasn't just a teen idol. He wanted to act, to grow, to be more than a singer. British pop stars had never done that before. Then came Summer Holiday. On January 10th, 1963, the film premiered in London. 3,000 fans flooded Leicester Square. Cliff couldn't even get out his car. That night, he missed his own premiere, but it didn't matter. The soundtrack hit number 1 on the UK albums chart before the film even hit theaters nationwide. It stayed there for 14 straight weeks. Multiple songs from the film reached #1. The Next Time, Bachelor Boy, Summer Holiday. Even the Shadows instrumental, Foot Tapper, topped the charts. The movie was the second biggest British box office hit of 1963, just behind From Russia with Love. And in that same year, Cliff was voted the most popular film star in the UK. But then came the Beatles. Most assumed Cliff would be swept aside. Yet in 1964, right in the heart of Beatlemania, Cliff released 6 top 10 hits. The Beatles only managed 5. His songs like Constantly on the Beach and I Could Easily Fall in Love with You kept him in the spotlight. Even when the Beatles were revolutionizing music and storming America, Cliff was holding his ground at home. The battle was real. His movie Summer Holiday and the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night clashed at cinemas across the country. Both broke records. But British audiences hadn't forgotten who had come first. Even Paul McCartney admitted it. He once said that the Beatles left for Hamburg because Cliff had everything sewn up in Britain. And John Lennon said it plainly before Cliff Richard and Move It. There was nothing worth listening to in England. In 1965, something truly unexpected happened. New Musical Express held a global readers' poll. Fans were asked to pick the world's top male singer. Cliff beat Elvis. He beat Lennon. He beat McCartney. That year, the Beatles released Help and Rubber Soul. Elvis was still selling out everywhere, but Cliff won. Why? Because even with the world changing around him, Cliff kept evolving. He didn't try to be the Beatles. He didn't chase trends. He balanced pop ballads, faith-friendly films, and genuine charm. He was consistent. And for fans around the world, that mattered. He was their rock before the British invasion and long after it. In June 1966, something happened that no one in the music world saw coming. At Earl's Court, Cliff Richard walked out onto the stage, not to sing, but to stand beside American evangelist Billy Graham and tell thousands of people that he had become a Christian. This wasn't just a quiet, personal decision. It was a bold public testimony broadcast across the country. Fans who knew him as a British version of Elvis or Little Richard were left stunned. Some cried. Others just stood in disbelief. The man they loved for his rebellious energy had taken a turn they never expected. But this moment wasn't random. It was the end of a spiritual journey that had started 2 years earlier. Still, doing it in front of Billy Graham's massive audience, right in the middle of the swinging 60s, gave a level of seriousness no one could ignore. Rock stars in that era weren't supposed to talk about God. They were meant to rebel, push limits, and break rules. Cliff's announcement went against everything the culture thought a pop icon should be. Almost immediately, people panicked. Some fans thought it was the end of his music career. Industry insiders whispered that he might quit and become a teacher. That idea wasn't far off. Cliff himself considered leaving the stage behind for good. He thought maybe he couldn't be a proper Christian and stay in the spotlight. Music magazines began speculating who would take his place. Booking agents backed off. The industry believed that you couldn't be both spiritual and a star. And for a while, Cliff wasn't sure either. But then something changed. Cliff didn't disappear. He stayed. And by doing so, he created something brand new. He didn't drop his faith, and he didn't quit music. Instead, he found a way to combine the two. He became the first major UK pop star to openly live his faith while staying in the charts. Nobody had done that before. Not like this. He proved you didn't have to pick one life over the other. You could be honest about your beliefs and still fill concert halls. This choice wasn't just career survival. It changed who he was. Cliff later admitted that his rock and roll image had been fake. He wasn't confident. He was just pretending. But after becoming a Christian, that changed. He said, "My confidence grew. My attitude changed. It wasn't important to be right all the time. The pressure to play a role disappeared. He felt free to be real." That new confidence helped him perform better, even as the Beatles and Murray beat acts dominated the charts. While others tried to keep up, Cliff grew stronger because he finally felt like himself. But by the mid-70s, Cliff's career hit a low. In 1975, for the first time, he didn't have a single song in the charts. People were starting to think his time was over. Then came Devil Woman, released in April 1976. The song was loud, edgy, and darker than anything he'd done before. It told a strange story about a psychic, a curse, and a stray cat. But more importantly, it rocked. It hit number 9 in the UK and number 6 in the US, his first top 10 in America. It sold over 2 million copies. Cliff was back. Even more shocking, the hard rock crowd embraced him. Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, and Elton John were spotted wearing I'm Nearly Famous badges, supporting his comeback album. These were guitar legends showing public respect for a man who'd once been seen as clean-cut and outdated. One music critic even compared Cliff's new album to Marvin Gaye's best work. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a full transformation. The kid from the 50s was now being hailed as a serious rock artist. He didn't stop there. In 1987, over 25 years into his career, Cliff released Always Guaranteed, a modern pop album that avoided the cheesy synths of the decade and sounded timeless. Inspired by Thriller, he teamed up again with Alan Tarney. The result, a platinum-selling record. It reached number 5 in the UK, stayed there for 24 weeks, and sold over 1.3 million copies. 4 singles from the album broke into the UK Top 40. Some people even went silver, selling 250,000 copies. Cliff proved that even in the late 80s, he could compete with the best. Then came Christmas 1988. Cliff released Mistletoe and Wine, a gentle, faith-filled holiday song. He recorded it with tinsel hanging over the mic in the middle of summer. The single debuted at number 7, shot to number 1 the next week, and stayed there for 4 straight weeks. It sold 750,000 copies in 6 weeks and became the year's biggest UK single, outperforming U2, Kylie Minogue, and Phil Collins. By 2024, it had gone platinum and was still earning $100,000 a year in royalties. Even decades later, people couldn't get enough of it. But one of the most impressive moments came in May 1989. Cliff released his 100th single. No other British artist had ever done that. To mark the occasion, he invited 2,000 fans to the London Palladium. He played them 6 unreleased tracks and asked them to vote. The song that came in second, The Best of Me, was the one he chose. It peaked at number 2 in the UK and earned silver certification. It also charted internationally, number 2 in Ireland, 25 in New Zealand, and 59 in Australia. It wasn't just about hitting 100. It was about staying relevant while the industry changed again and again. Cliff Richard's concert at Wembley Stadium in June 1989 wasn't just another show. It was a full-blown spectacle. They called it the event, and it lived up to that name. Wembley was packed. Thousands poured in to witness something more than music. It was a time machine. The first half of the concert brought back the 1950s with Cliff paying tribute to the TV show Oh Boy, the same show that launched his career in 1958. Cliff didn't perform alone. He brought on the Vernon's Girls, the Dallas Boys, the Kalin Twins, acts that once ruled British rock and roll. For the fans and the crowd, it felt like stepping into a living jukebox. Then the second half kicked in. That's when Cliff showed why he wasn't just a nostalgia act.